sometimes the properties are not habitable,
Yeah.
which would mean that you are highly unlikely to get a mortgage on the property.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Resides Podcast, talking everything mortgages. We are going to talk to you about buy-to-lets today. So I'll just kick straight off. Rav, what is a buy-to-let in simple terms?
Buy to let is effectively an investment property that you're looking to buy with the sole purpose of letting it out. So you can generate some rental income. You own the property, you're going to get tenants in, they'll pay your rent. Hopefully, that rent is enough for you to pay the mortgage, and therefore you get to enjoy a rental income. But in long run, hopefully your property will also appreciate. So when you do sell that property, you get a bit of equity out in terms of the investment that has grown, which is why it's also known as an investment property or buy to let. Effectively, you're buying to let it out.
Cool, perfect, nice, thanks.
So you're buying it to let it out?
Buying to let it out?
Buying to let it out.
It's quite simple, isn't it, really? Steve, how does buy-to-lets work in terms of affordability? I know we've discussed on previous episodes sort of getting your first property or moving home or remortgaging. How does the affordability work? Say, for example, on a buy-to-let.
Yeah, so typically speaking, with buy-to-lets, it's not based on your income. There are a few lenders that will assess your income. However, it's all based around the rental income that your property can earn. There's a few calculations and stress tests that lenders do, but essentially, for however much you want to borrow, it needs to be at a certain level of rent for you to borrow that amount, and that's essentially the affordability assessment.
Perfect. And how is that rent? How do the lenders get to that rent figure?
They'll do a valuation themselves. Yeah, so it's all based on the market valuation of the rental income, but they'll always send out a valuer to inspect that.
Cool, perfect. Thank you, Stephen. What about deposits on buy-to-let? Do they work the same as sort of a standard residential mortgage?
No, so with standard residential mortgage, because your purpose is to live in the property, and you've got to keep up with your mortgage payments and you're not relying on rental income as such, lenders tend to want to reduce their risk. So they ask for customers or borrowers to put more of a deposit. And typically, most lenders start around 25%. However, there's a few lenders that can go a little bit less at 20. I don't know if there's a 15% mortgage out there, 15% deposit out there.
At the moment.
Not at the moment, I wouldn't
20%
say, but yeah, I'd say around about to 20 to 25% mark is what you'd be looking at with a deposit on a buy-to-let mortgage.
But of course, the more the merrier.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, the more the merrier. That's only going to improve your rate.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Rav, obviously you mentioned there that it's an investment property, sort of you earn income from the rental income. It's not that simple though, is it? There's sort of other costs that you've got to factor in when you just have a buy-to-let, because it's not just your mortgage, sort of, you've got to factor in stuff like, I'll let you elaborate about like maintenance and sort of stuff
There are
like
tons of costs, like in terms of like you're buying a property, so you start with the tax side of it, which is your stamp duty. So you're going to have to pay a stamp duty. Often the stamp duty is that of a higher rate when it comes to buy-to-let mortgages. Not mortgages, buy-to-let property, you generally tend to pay a higher rate of stamp duty. Once you got that through, then you're gonna let the property out. So you might need to engage an estate agent who will then charge you a set percentage of the rent. Often it can range from as cheap as like 6%. It can go up to like 11 or 12% if it's like a fully managed property. Then you got associated costs when it comes to mortgages, right? So there'll be like there possibly might be a valuation fee. There might be a product fee. Some brokers do charge, we don't. So that's a plus side on that. But that's some cost to associate. It's a rental income that you're going to generate. So being a good citizen, you're going to declare that income to King Charles, right? So you're gonna you could possibly do your own accounts, but you might want to get a smart accountant who can help you reduce your tax liability. So you might have a cost from the accountant side. So these are some basic costs that are going to be ongoing. Well, when I say ongoing, the valuation and the product fee from the mortgage side isn't ongoing, but the rest are the ongoing charges. So you need to have a clear idea that if you're buying this property, what are your ongoing charges year on year, so you can factor in your cost and how much profit at the end of
Yeah.
the year you're going to make as a result of letting this property out. On
You
top
need
of,
to do your homework, don't you?
oh yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
definitely
There's a
sit down.
lot of homework
And
to do.
what sort of yield do you think is a good place to be in, Rev?
So, frankly speaking, it all depends on rate of inflation, right? But inflation is where you are losing your money, and yield is where you're making your money. So, if your inflation is 5% and you're going to get a yield of 5%, frankly speaking, you're not making any money because you're losing your money whilst you're making money. So, right now, we're looking at inflation's fallen down to like roughly about 2.3, 2%. We're getting there, we're getting better at it. Typically, on an investment property like that, we would say anywhere like 6 or 7% yield. I would say is a really good yield for a property market. So if you go up north, you can get like a yield of 8% onwards as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of yield, I think location is quite important, isn't it? Because it's
Yeah.
not just as simple as, oh, I'm going to buy to let. You've got to look at places where there is a high yield, there's a higher need for sort of rental properties,
Yeah.
etc. It's not. It's like I said, it's not straightforward. You've got to sort of know what you're doing to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean it's investment property, so if you just leave your emotions out and just like get a pen and paper and,
Yeah, that's
and
a big
really
point.
just
Such a big
focus on numbers and make that numbers work for you, that will go
Yeah.
a long run.
I think another cost as well that you've got to factor in is sort of getting the property up to standard, because if you want to rent it out, people are going to want to live in
Oh,
the
yeah.
property. So if you buy sort of just a bit of a rundown house, you're going to have to do a bit of work to the property as well, aren't you?
True. Yeah. On top of that, your tenant might leave, and therefore there might be some wear and tear, some damages
Yeah.
that's done. So you're gonna have to
Gaps
like
in-
some
Gaps in
maintenance.
tenancy as
Yeah.
well.
Gaps
Yeah.
of tenancy.
You
Yeah, I
know.
was
There's
going to.
also electric safety certificate and all these sort of certifications that you need to have in
Yeah.
It
place.
does all add up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, definitely.
I think that's what I was going to say as well. It's all dependent on having a tenant as well, isn't it? If there's
Yeah.
a 6-month gap,
Oh yeah.
who you're liable for
Yeah, you still have to make that
everything, the
payment.
mortgage, council
exactly.
tax, TV license, all sort of other bills, etc. The property. So it's not something to go into off a whim, is it? You have to sort of not know what you're doing, because obviously everyone has to start
Just
somewhere.
research it.
But
There's
yeah.
loads about these days, I think, isn't there? You just need to sit down and do all these figures and
Yeah.
Or just
work
watch
out
a
whether it's
podcast
worth
on YouTube about
or
it.
just watch.
Just thought of another cost as well. Like obviously, given that it's your buy to let, if in the future you do want to sell, there's going to be capital gains that you're going to need to pay. If
Totally.
if your property's appreciated, although it's good as appreciated, you just got to bear in mind there's going to be some capital gains tax to pay as well.
Yeah.
More money for King Charles.
Yeah.
Oh, more money for them. Yeah.
Like they need it.
But effectively, yeah. I think as a nutshell, you just want to know what your ongoing running costs would be
Yeah.
and what your tax liabilities will be, because these two are never going to go away,
That's it.
and more likely or often they'll probably rise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you have a clear understanding on what those running costs and what your
Yeah.
tax liabilities are, I think that's a very good place to start to understand whether this property is for you or not.
Have a bit of a buffer, have a bit of a pot
100%.
somewhere.
Yeah.
And then hopefully it's a good investment. And just like Rav said, treat it like an investment.
100%.
Yeah, I think obviously, Rav, you mentioned costs earlier, and tax was one of the big ones. They changed the way that they calculate the tax on buy-to-lets. I think was it back in 2017 with the
Obviously, we can't
Tax
formally
relief.
advise on anything tax related.
but we can speak about what's happened. So,
So this isn't formal advice.
this isn't advice. This is just stating facts.
Yeah, no.
Like Rafa Benitez. But yeah, because I think it was in 2017 the interest tax relief changed or something like that.
Yeah, and it was tapered out, and it got taken out by 2020, I believe. But essentially, those were good times, because if your rent was £1,000 and your mortgage was £500, you could effectively tell HMRC that £500 is my cost. So what I made is £500. So you would be then taxed on that £500 a month,
Opposed to the whole
opposed
gross.
to entire £1,000, right? And then now we have come to a point where, regardless of what your costs are associated to this particular property, if you're making £1,000 a month, then that's where you're going to pay your tax on,
Yeah.
right? So you are not being taxed on the profit, but you are being taxed on the turnover. In other words, when it comes to this tax system, tax regime that we currently have in UK, which is quite very unique and frustrating at the same time.
I think, was that factual enough for you, Ducky? There was no advice given there, was there? It was just facts.
Fact,
Perfect.
pure fact.
I think, again, not advice, but we see after that happened, we see a lot of people switching to maybe looking to do it under a company like an SPV, didn't we? What are the benefits of buying under an SPV, Stephen?
Well, we can't formally advise on any tax benefits, but if you've got a good accountant, it's a good idea to have a chat with them and find out, if it will benefit you in the long run. Higher earners, because like we said, the income tax, etc., plays a part. Your income plays a part on that, a huge part on that. But there's lots of benefits that you can probably use by having or by holding property in a limited company. On the mortgage side, the costs are a little bit higher. So the rates are a bit higher, the fees involved are a bit higher as well. But it could be beneficial for you in the long run as an investment.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. And again, this is not advice, but just facts. The other cost was stamp duty, slightly different for buy-to-let, isn't it? Because it's the second property.
Yeah, it's at the increased, basically effectively the top banding in terms of the stamp duty you have to pay. Obviously, with first-time buyers, you almost like kind of skip the first band, but this is like an extra 3%, I believe it is.
I think that's factual. Yeah.
Yeah, on top of what you'd normally pay if you were moving home or if you were a first-time buyer. So, yeah, I mean, we can speak to us and we'll be able to tell you what your stamp duty liability is going to be, or speak to a solicitor; they'll know as well.
Cool, perfect. And I think as well, when you're buying a buy-to-let property, it's sort of, I think this links back to what you said earlier, Rav, about if you just take the emotion out of it, it's easier to then haggle when you're buying. Because if you're buying a place that you want to live and you really want it, you would pay a little bit more, wouldn't you, just to secure the property?
Yeah, good point.
But I think haggling's quite a big thing with buy-to-lets.
Absolutely, yeah.
Every time you go out and looking for that kind of property, ask the agent like what is roughly this property is going to be letting out for, or if it's currently tenanted, what the current tenant is paying that rent, right? Scrape some amount, just so you can create a buffer. So if someone is paying like £1,000 a month, you work on basis that you're going to get like 900 in the worst market or like 950. So you're working on a worst case scenario and then work backwards. Okay, at 950, my estate agent cost is 10%. I will spend £50 in maintenance. I'm going to keep a buffer. So you build up a buffer over a period of time. So it's like at the end of the day, I'm going to make like £400 a month as a rental income, right? Then you factor in the tax side of it. So you would then see whether, are you willing to pay 120,000, 140,000, or whatever that value of the property is. You can work out a percentage of it, right? And see whether is it above inflation or is it under inflation. If it's above inflation, then at least you're making some money. If it's under inflation, you need to walk away from it.
Yeah. I was always going to just add on that in terms of the actual cost of it. If you manage to haggle down a purchase price, it means you're going to pay less stamp duty than what you would have. It also means that if you're putting a 25% deposit down, that's also going to be less. So, you're quids in if you can haggle. So,
And I think with buy-to-lets, you're not in a chain, are you? So sort of that can be, you can say to the estate agent, look, I'm not in a chain, I'm ready to go straight away. I want it for this price. And I think linking it back again, if you have not got no emotion about this property, if it doesn't work out, scrap that one, move on to the next. And then once it does work, you would have saved sort of a substantial amount.
There's a good way of looking at all that, Rav, the calculating X, Y, and Z. I'd just offer 10 grand less.
Yeah, I mean, again, it all comes down to doing your research. If you find out why they're selling the property, how long it's been on the market, if it's been on for 3 or 4 months, then you can sort of see that they're going to be quite eager to receive an offer. Just lowball.
Indeed.
I think you do it with respect. Don't lowball by a lot. But if you just sort of
don't halve the price.
Maybe not half. But if you sort of knock 20,
you're right. That
20K
soft
off.
information does help you to negotiate an offer, and that's where your negotiation skills are. But you go and view a property and probably factor in like, okay, I'm probably going to change carpet. That's going to cost me $1,000. I'm going to have to redo the bathroom because it's in not very good place, or you want to change something. So you need to make property appealing for the tenant as well if you're going to fetch a good rent, right?
Absolutely.
You can't just simply let out as it is. possibly you can if it's really done a property. So factor in that rent and then deduct it in their asking
Yeah.
price, and maybe start your negotiation from there on, effectively.
I think we see a lot of people sort of trying to use auction as well for buy to let, don't we? Sort of as a
Yeah.
good opportunity. What should a client look out for at auction with a buy to let? Because you don't really see the property, do you? But
No.
I think you get the legal pack before, don't you? So it's good.
Oh, you
to sort
can
of-
view the property still, can't you? You can go and have a
I
look.
think one of the main points is assessing whether you're able to get a mortgage. From experience in broking, we do have a lot of clients that are looking to purchase on at auction,
Yeah.
and sometimes the properties are not habitable,
Yeah.
which would mean that you are highly unlikely to get a mortgage on the property, which would mean then you probably have to look at a specialist finance sort of
Yeah.
option. But yeah, it's just about assessing the total cost of actually acquiring
Yeah.
a property at auction. Is
I
one of
think
the main points.
for it to be livable, what does there need to be? Running water and a
Sink and a toilet.
working bathroom. So as long as it's got that, you can crack on. As long as you've got a decent broker.
I think auction's an interesting topic because it's, if you're lucky enough to have the cash, you've obviously
Yeah.
got the asset there. Once it's all completed, you can then look to remortgage,
Yeah.
take more money out of it, and buy another place on that. But if you're not, it's a bit dodgy because of the strict completion deadlines
Yeah.
in getting a mortgage. Like Darren said, if you walk in and you've not
Yeah.
viewed it and it's
Yeah.
it needs a complete rebuild or whatever, there's no lender that's going to lend on it really. Then you're going to have to look at specialist finance, and then if you've got a residential property or another property, it's going to impact that as well, and
Yeah.
it just gets a bit messy. So with auction, I mean, it's not the best idea to go mortgage first, but
I think a lot of people watch Homes Under the Hammer, don't they, with old Dion Dublin, and they think
Dion.
they'll go and be a property expert. But auctions is, I think, maybe for a bit more of experienced landlords.
Yeah, definitely. But it's a good way of getting a good deal as well.
Yeah.
But again, I think the good deal as well comes with the fact that you're paying cash for it.
Yeah, cool. Just one thing I'll touch on last quickly before we finish this one is what we haven't discussed, which I think is quite important, is when you do a buy to let, to sort of maximise your rental income. A lot of people take interest only, don't they? Just to sort of reduce monthly payments. So
Yeah, it just goes back to Rav's point, doesn't it? It's purely investment, so
Yeah.
just maximise cash flow and stuff. And
Cool, perfect. So again, just to wrap this one up, I think it's sort of important to do your research on buy to let, sort of have a bit of cash in the bank to sort of account for the extra costs and a buffer. And again, as always, speak to a professional, even if it's not Reside, just speak to a broker and they'll sort you out. But it'd be better if you speak to Reside.